Hi there, and thanks for joining me at the Pueblo Heritage Museum. Today we're going to go over a brief timeline of Native Americans in our region. So the first indigenous peoples that we had in southeastern Colorado, the first good evidence is from a site called the Olson Chubbuck site. These, what are called Paleo-Indians, were here about 10,000 years ago. And at the Olson Chubbuck site, we have very good evidence of their super specialized hunting methods. They used large points, similar in size to these modern recreations. And they would have those mounted on the end of a spear and using tools such as an atlatl, where you knock in the spear to help you throw and really sink it into these big game animals. These early Paleo-Indians came here and were very specialized at hunting the big game animals. The first ones when they were here, there were surely mastodons and mammoths in the region. But the Olson Chubbuck site and other sites we know, primarily they were eating bison, and the bison at the time was about 25% larger than our modern bison. So they were a very specialized band of hunters. They moved quickly across the New World. The Clovis people were some of the earliest, and we have evidence of Clovis points from the far northern parts of the United States all the way into South America. So these specialized big game hunters quickly colonized the New World. Over time, these groups began to splinter and they diversified in their subsistence. We kind of lose track of them as we get into the Archaic period. So moving beyond the highly specialized big game hunters that we saw in the Paleo period, archaeologists identified the next big period of Native American habitation as the Archaic period. In the Archaic period, the defining features here, the indigenous people are beginning to experiment with agriculture and horticulture, which first appeared in the Valley of Mexico about 8,000 years ago. As these groups began more intensively farming the river valleys here in Colorado, they also became more sedentary. And one group we see that was fairly sedentary for this part of the world was the Apishapa culture, which existed from about 1000 AD to 1400 or thereabout. The Apishapa built stone enclosures, which we'll talk about more, but they also utilized caves and rock shelters. One site in particular that yielded a lot of perishable remains was the Chamber Cave site. You can see some of the artifacts here, which include materials that would otherwise decompose, such as bone beads. Here's a bone saw, some bone awls, segments of basketry, bits of a leather pouch, so on and so forth. So these people left an extensive mark on southeastern Colorado. So another site associated with the Apishapa culture in southeastern Colorado is the Wallace site. This site consisted of about 8 buildings in a village, 8 housing units on top of the bluff. Just below the bluff's lip was this rock art panel, and further still below that was the Arkansas River below. So we can imagine where people would be watching the game from this high promontory, watching the elk and bison and deer herds coming through, also potentially cultivating corn and beans down in the river bottom. And just like mural art is so important in Pueblo today, so too 800 years ago did people living along the Arkansas River think it was important to record their cultural motifs in paintings. So the Apishapa culture kind of disappeared right around 1400, and they abandoned their villages that were along the rivers here in southeastern Colorado. And historians pick up the story of indigenous peoples in Colorado right around the 1600s, when many tribes received horses from the Spanish who were exploring this region. In the 1700s, one of the first maps of our region was done as part of the Dominguez-Escalante Expedition. And relations with the Spanish were not always good. In 1779, the famous battle between De Anza and Cuerna Verde took place, where De Anza defeated the Comanche chief. Shortly after, in the 1780s, the Spanish began experimenting with a reservation system, and they moved the Comanche onto a reservation on the St. Charles River just east of Pueblo, where they tried to confine this nomadic tribe and convert them into farmers. The experiment did not work very well or last very long. So that experiment that the Spanish ran did not last very long. In 1821, Mexico declared independence from Spain, and as a result, the Santa Fe Trail opened for trade. Stores like the El Pueblo here in Pueblo along the banks of the Arkansas, as well as the Greenhorn store, which was located just south of us, they opened up and began trading and selling wares at the crossroads of cultures, from the Anglos to the Mexicans and the native peoples living in the region. So the trading post that existed on the Mexican frontier did not last very long either. In 1848, the United States won the Mexican-American War, pushing the border with Mexico from the Arkansas River further south to the Rio Grande. Colorado's primary indigenous tribe, the Utes, were given their first treaty in 1868, which granted them effectively the entire western slope of our state. However, it was less than a dozen years when the U.S. government decided we had given them too much. We took almost all of that back, and today the Ute Nation has 2 reservations in southwestern Colorado. Good job, folks. We just made it through 12,000 years of prehistory in a matter of minutes. There is a rich record of archaeological and historical Native Americans in our region, and all of this can be seen at the Pueblo Heritage Museum. We invite you all to come visit us very soon.